Welcome to You're Not Actually a Leader Yet, the podcast where I bridge the gap between the person you are today and the leader you're meant to be. My name is Cassie Adkins, your lovingly honest leadership coach. Today, I have a very special guest for you all, Marc Mawhinney. Marc is a lifelong entrepreneur who helps coaches get more clients without paid advertising. He achieves this with his coaching programs, his podcast, The Natural Born Coaches, his Facebook group, The Coaching Jungle, and his exclusive hard copy newsletter, The Secret Coach Club. He's been a speaker at events like Social Media Marketing World, frequently makes media appearances, and contributes for Entrepreneur.com. Today, Marc and I are going to dive into the internal struggles that coaches and leaders alike face every day, from needing discipline to walking the walk and everything in between. Marc and I are going to highlight how the way that you interact with the world impacts every aspect of your day-to-day. So today, I have a very special guest with us. I have Marc Mawhinney. And Marc, if you would love to take a moment to introduce yourself, and then we will jump into things.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Cassie. In a nutshell, I'm a coach, and I've been in the coaching world now for a little over 10 years. It was March 2014 when I started. So my whole business is helping coaches get more clients organically without paid ads. But I also believe that coaches, despite being really big on personal development, big readers, all that other stuff, often need some other help because it's tough to be disciplined yourself 100% of the time and see the forest for the trees. So yeah, I'm big on helping coaches, and that's my raison d'etre.
Beautiful. I love that, Marc. And there's so many similarities with coaches and leaders, really, because as a coach and as a leader, you are responsible for helping other people develop themselves and see aspects of themselves that they need to improve upon and work on their humility and different things so that they can continue to grow and progress.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find not just coaches, probably most entrepreneurs or leaders don't give themselves credit for the growth because they don't realize where they're learning new stuff every day. They're a much different person today versus 365 days ago. And this is why I'm really big on coaches charging, as much as they can and stuff, is you have to be credited for that improvement. You have more skills, you've learned a lot more and stuff. And we don't give ourselves enough credit. It's like, my son's a little older now. He's 15, almost 16. But when he was younger, we bumped into someone at the mall who hadn't seen him in like 2 years. And they're like, oh my God, he's grown so much. What the heck's going on? I'm like, no, he hasn't. He's, the same as he's always been, because I'm seeing him every day, right? And then seeing him quite a while. So we don't realize our growth because we're so close to the action. So
Yes. It makes that tangible ROI very challenging to put into words or a dollar amount or, those kind of things as well, because there's not a hard number, right? You can't say, hey, I'm going to coach you for, so long, and you're going to go from a 3.5 in empathy to a 9.2. Those kind of things. It's this very kind of just arbitrary growth that, like you said, most other people will see before we see it ourselves.
It'd be much easier if there's.
And I think as leaders, people recognize that as well. Through my journey of leadership, I've coached, led, worked with so many people who I've gotten to witness their transformation and their growth. And when I would point out, wow, so-and-so 6 months ago, this is something you never would have done. They take pause and they were like, oh, you're right. I wouldn't have done this 6 months ago. So they were living the change. And until I pointed it out and mentioned it, they didn't even realize the growth that they really had gone through.
Yeah, it's funny because I start all my group coaching calls with going around the virtual roundtable to give a win for the week. And sometimes I'll have one of the clients that'll say, no, there was no wins for the week. It didn't go well. in my opinion. But then I'm like, oh, really? No wins. And then they get talking, and pretty soon they're like, oh, wait a minute, I did this, and I did that. Oh, and I did, and there's a lot more wins than they realize. So we need to lighten up a little bit on ourselves and give ourselves some credit.
Yes. And in general, between leaders, coaches, and humans, I think it's that introspective piece, giving yourself that time to really reflect and be honest with yourself as far as what could you have done better? What did you do well? And either building upon what you did well or tweaking what you maybe didn't do super well so that you can learn and grow.
Yeah, I'm a really big journaler, so I've been doing it for years. I very rarely miss a day. And one of the practices that's helped with my journaling is at the end of the day, writing down 3 wins for that day. Now, they may not be enormous wins to the outside world or something, but it makes me appreciate it. And it could be something as simple as, got a podcast 1 sheet done. So to get out on more shows, at first glance, oh, that's not really a big deal. No, it's going to get me out in front of people like we're doing now. And that's a win, and sometimes it's a bit of a stretch. Like I get 2 wins. What's that 3rd win of the day or whatever? And then I'm like, oh, I cleaned my house. There's a win.
There you go. It really, and I think like you said, the point isn't that they're wins for anyone else. They really need to be just personal wins. Because for a public speaker, going out on stage is not necessarily a win for them. As somebody like myself who is terrified of public speaking, that would be all 3 of my wins for the end of the day, because it was such an out of comfort zone growth moment. And so to be able to really reflect on yourself and what are those personal wins without judgment on what other people would think or interpret those as wins or not.
Yeah. So I think what we have to get away from entrepreneurs and leaders is that we're all big goal setters, right? We want to do really big things. But I think I'm a much bigger fan of Darren Hardy. Wrote the book, The Compound Effect. He also wrote The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster, which is so true. But with The Compound Effect, he was highlighting that how small daily wins can accumulate and snowball really quickly. So you have to kind of look at where your feet are right in front of you instead of always looking at the horizon. Now, I see that in my world, like coaches, I want to impact 1 billion people. All these people want to impact 1 billion people. Well, if you change 100 lives, 1,000 lives, that's pretty darn good. There's a big ripple effect there too. But if you're always looking, I'm going to be the biggest whatever, and I'm going to be huge, and I'm going to impact 1 billion people, then you're not maybe doing the little things that you need to be doing to get there, or you're not appreciating it as much as you should. So I'm really big on just make each day a masterpiece or as good as you can make it, and that's going to add up.
So Mark, I can't tell you how deeply what you just said resonates with me. And I have goosebumps that you can't see because I'm in long sleeves. I actually have a tattoo on my forearm that is a starfish that says it matters to this one. Have you ever heard Lauren Isley's The Starfish Story?
I have, yes.
Beautiful. Well, for anyone that has not heard it, the essence is that an old man comes across a boy on the beach throwing starfish in the ocean. And he's doing so because the tide has washed them up. And if he doesn't throw them back, they'll die. The old man kind of laughs and says, look at the beach. There's thousands and thousands of starfish. You're not making a difference. And the little boy picks up a starfish, tosses it back in, looks at the older man. And he said, well, it mattered to that one. And that is the essence of how I try to live my life. I would love to rid the beach of starfish, right? I would love to be able to, like you said, help billions and really make these big impacts. But for me, I have to remember that it's the starfish that matters, not the beach. And the impact that I'm making is at that individual level and the ripple effect of that starfish being thrown back in. and just doing what I can when I can, and remembering that I have that power and that each one of us in life has the power to impact the people around us. And it's those small daily actions that when we look back are really the game changers.
Yeah, and the starfish story is much more positive than a similar type one's a crabs in a bucket bowl metaphor or whatever. You know that one, which is not as positive as the starfish one. So, I was basically saying it, and I believe it's true. If you have a bunch of crabs in a bucket, if one of them tries to escape, the other ones are going to haul it down and keep it from escaping the bucket. So it's kind of like, I don't know if it's big in the States. In Australia, there's a tall poppy syndrome. And I think in Canada, too, we have a bit of it where if you pop your head up a little bit too high over the crowd, they'll want to chop it off or whatever. So it's kind of like a way of saying, know your role, stay in your place, which I hate that whole thing, or the crabs in a bucket. So I always tell people you're going to encounter some crabs in a bucket in your online journey, because that's where I do my business. And you just have to keep pushing along. Don't let the haters down.
Yes. Morbid story, but beautiful messaging behind it.
I don't have a crab in a bucket tattoo on my arm or anything. So, but I just thought I'd mention that story as well.
So next time we meet, Mark, you're going to show off your tattoo, right?
There we go. Will do.
I would die, by the way, if you went and did that. And probably your loved ones would not be so happy.
Well, I'm a Cancer. I was born on June 27th, so maybe that works for the whole crab tattoo.
Okay, you could use it as an excuse.
There we go. Yeah.
I love it. So, Mark, you and I have a very similar approach in that surface level just doesn't fly. You and I both go that 1, 2, 3 layers deeper in, I believe you said, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I really want to talk a little bit more about that, because it's not just true for leaders. It's not just true for coaches. It's really very universal. And so for both of our listeners, this will resonate with them and apply.
Oh, yeah, there's so much to talk about there. Well, there's a concept that was reinforced with me, and I can't take credit for this. I heard it from Dan and Nicole Culver, who I've gotten to know a little bit. And what they were talking about was identifying your main value and then making sure that that's being reflected in everything you do. So, for example, with leaders, may say freedom is their big value. But if you say freedom's your value, but then you don't take any time for yourself and you're just like working nonstop, and I get that. I've struggled with workaholism all my life. I'm working on it, ironically, working on my workaholism. But yeah, if you have to make sure that it reflects your value. Your values is reflected across the board with everything that you do. So that's always stuck with me, and I'm having to remind myself of that constantly because you tend to forget it. And if you're, take for example, again, freedom, if you're just getting started in your business or your career, and you say freedom's a big thing. But if you're not giving yourself that any freedom now, then you're almost subconsciously telling yourself that you're not going to be down the road 10 years when you are, where you want to be with it. So I think it's really important to reflect that. There's the whole, Martin Luther King had the quote about doing your best job, even if you're a street sweeper, with that. And I try to remember that too. If I'm doing something that seems not consequential, that, hey, I want to make sure I'm doing the best job. Finally, one last example, Grant Cardone, I think it was, mentioned that you want to imagine that what would you be doing if there's a camera on you 24/7 that you then had to watch and see how much work you're doing, for example. Because everyone's like, oh, geez, I'm so busy. I work 100 hours a week or whatever. Are you really working 100 hours a week? Well, no, there was 20 minutes that you were scrolling TikTok, and then you sent memes to friends for another 35 minutes. And, then you watched a few episodes of Tiger King or whatever you're watching. So, yeah, there's just a couple examples around that.
Yeah. You mentioned freedom as a value that a lot of entrepreneurs have. And actions don't necessarily always align with that. What are some other values and kind of misalignments that you see in the entrepreneurial space?
Well, here's one that I made a mistake very early on in my first year coaching. I would take on clients. I wouldn't say I'd take on anyone. They had to have a pulse. That was important. They had to be able to fog a mirror, or whatever, and pay a few dollars.
Okay, good.
What I realized though early on is that wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for them probably either. And not to bash the people I was working with, but they weren't fully committed and just wasn't a great experience or as good as it could have been. Where things changed for me is I sat down one day and I identified several criteria for who my ideal clients were or who I wanted. And they were things like they have to be wanting to make a big impact was one thing. Not saying it's, impacted a billion people or whatever, but if someone comes to me and like, well, I want to kind of start a coaching business on the side for a few extra dollars and something to play around with, that doesn't excite me as much as someone who has a big goal. Things like they have to be coachable and respect boundaries. If they're expecting me to return their message within 20 minutes at 3 a.m., it's probably not the right fit. They have to be action takers. I don't want to have to pull them across the finish line. They got to roll up their sleeves and do the work. They got to pay me on time, what I'm worth, and so on. And when I created that list, I went through my existing clients and I said, I had 5 points of criteria for it. I want people who have all 5 or at least 4 out of 5, and then I can work on the other one. And then any new people I take on have to match all that. And it's been incredible using that criteria with it, because I think I've avoided some bad coaching relationships and things that wouldn't have worked out for me or for the person. And it's just, there's a power that comes from having a criteria where you feel like you're in control. Where so often in the coaching world where I'm in, it's the coach feels like they're not in control. They're begging for business, and it's the prospect that holds all the power. But you take that power back, I think they can sense that there's an energy you can pick up with it. So that would be one thing I would recommend for anyone, whatever business you're in or career, to have some very firm criteria for clients or for what you will and won't accept.
Yeah, and I think that's just true in life. It's one of those, if you stand for nothing, or if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing kind of essence. And if we don't have those boundaries and kind of value set for ourselves of what we do want, or most importantly, what we don't want, then there is no line. It's just a blur that you get lost in. And then there's not the direction, there's not the fulfillment. And that's personal or professional life. When people think about the friendships they want to have, the significant relationships they want to have, if you know what you want or don't want, it really helps with that clarity of making sure the people and your actions and relationships all align with that value set. So what a wonderful point.
Yeah, no, I guarantee that one action of just putting the criteria down, that's huge. And Michael Port talked about it in Book Yourself Solid. So he said that you want to imagine your business as being like the hot club or restaurant in town, like not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry could stroll in off the street, right, and get a table or get in. There's a 6'8", 350-pound bouncer at the front door, and they got the clipboard, and they're seeing if you're on the list, or so on. And I think that's important for us entrepreneurs as well. And I guess we're getting into a bit of a tangent, but I think it's an important point to note that I find that business now versus years ago it's so much easier to become a quote entrepreneur, right? Because if you have $10, you buy or $15 a domain, and then you get a website app, slap up, and hey, I'm in business. Versus in the old days when you need a heck of a lot more money to rent office space and hire staff and get advertising and so on. So I think it's great that democratization of entrepreneurship, but it also means it doesn't feel real all the time. Like, you're working at home in your pajama pants, slippers, you're eating a bowl of Cheerios while you're doing stuff on the laptop. You're not getting dressed up, going to the office and things. And sometimes that could slip into your mentality where it doesn't feel real. So like I deal with this last week by my mother wanted to pop over for a visit. I love my mom, but sometimes she's old school and she just assumes, oh, Mark works from home and he's, not available all the time. And I had a crazy day with like Zoom calls and everything else. And she texts me, she's like, hey, I'm on my way over for a visit. And I'm thinking, would you do this if I was working in an office space or whatever? So I kind of had to tell her, hey, look, like, can you give me a little more notice here?
Yeah, you are reading my mind. I was thinking about it this morning as I looked at the sink full of dishes when I came up to my office, and I thought, I need to do those today. But I'm like, wait a minute, I have work today. Yes, it's upstairs. Yes, it's within sight of the kitchen. But I have to allow myself that permission to say I'm at work, even when it's at home. And for me, that boundary, one of the boundaries I have to have is that when I do my work, it's in this office at this computer that doesn't leave, that kind of thing, so that work stays work and home stays home. And there's all different ways to kind of create those physical boundaries that help us mentally keep those boundaries as well.
Yes.
And as leaders, as coaches, it's so easy to kind of be on all the time. And it's so vital to be off, to have that switch.
It's funny you mentioned that about working in your home office versus elsewhere, because I'm making an effort to do that. I had a really bad habit of I worked all day in the home office. Then if I'll watch Netflix at night and chill out, but I get the laptop up and I'm multitasking. It's why I could never get into movies or shows with subtitles, because I didn't want to have to read. I wanted to be able to type while I was kind of just looking up and down. And so, it's not a good habit. But so now I did do the same thing. I'm like, no, the laptop's not going to go all around the house, because then all of a sudden work bleeds into everywhere. And also I got really good at getting better at enforcing times when I'll check email and social media. So before, it could be when I wake up at 6 a.m., right away checking the phone, and right up until 11, 12 o'clock at night. So you're only getting 6 hours off the clock when you're sleeping, 6 or 7 hours most. Now, some people might look at this, say this is still too much, but I'll do a first check-in at 9. I'll do another one at noon. I'll do one at 3 p.m., one at 6 p.m., supper, and then the final check-in at 9 p.m. So there's 5 check-ins. Now, I say check-in, I make an effort not to go on and then get stuck in the scroll, going up and down, doom scrolling, news feeds, and all that. I call it drive-by postings. I'll get in, if I'm posting something, post what I want to say, and then I'm speeding out of there. I'm just closing it and getting the heck out. So, yeah, it's tough because it's very pervasive. It can invade your whole life. Social media, they're very good at sucking you in, and same with work is too.
Yes. And as leaders, and really, in the coaching world too, you have to lead by example. You have to practice what you preach. And I ask myself all the time when I go to check my phone late at night or come up to my computer to send off an email late or different things, I think, would I encourage this or discourage this of the people that I coach and I work with? Do I want them to, I don't want to do the whole do as I say, not as I do duality. And so for me, which the LinkedIn algorithm hates, I don't get on LinkedIn on the weekends. For me, LinkedIn is very, very work related. I don't tend to just doom scroll those kind of things. I literally have no other social media for that exact reason. And so I don't post on the weekends. I could schedule them, but then I'm not going to engage with them. I'm not going to do anything because I'm really trying to shut off and engage with family on the weekends. And the same 9 o'clock at night, right? I don't want to be sending emails at 9 o'clock at night because, Mark, if you told me, oh yeah, I had a client that needed me at 9 o'clock at night, I'd say, excuse me, that's your time. Can that client wait? And the answer would likely be yes. And so it's hard to hold ourselves to that same standard and those kind of things.
Yeah, it's interesting because when COVID hit, there was a fear from employers that employees would be stealing time, right? Where they're working from home, they'll be watching The Price is Right, or they'll be going out for a walk and all this. And there's a real fear. But what studies or stats have shown after the fact is that it went the other way. That if anything, the employees were working more because there's no longer that barrier, and they're working at night and everything else like it. So there's a great book I just read. It's a new one by Cal Newport called Slow Productivity. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's got a cool cover with like a cabin in the woods and stuff. And I like Cal Newport's other stuff. So he did like Deep Work and different books like that. But his whole thesis in that book is that you actually get more done by working at a more natural, slower pace where you take some breaks and recharge and refresh. And he gives real life examples of famous scientists, writers, just all sorts of different fields who had a what some people nowadays would call them lazy, but they accomplished like a ton. So maybe they wrote for just a couple hours a day and then they went for walks and drinking wine the rest of the day and stuff. But they wrote like 30 books in a decade, which doesn't really compute. It's like, how did this happen? But so there's great strategies in that book, but I would recommend on what we're talking about to check it out.
That's wonderful. Yes, I love that thinking, because it boils down to perspective. And I think your mom texting you is the same example of perspective and just perception of, oh, you work from home, so you're available all the time, or, oh, you took 3 walks today, so you're not productive, or you're lazy. And it's so easy to be quick to assume and judge from the outside and not realize what's really going on in other people's worlds.
I hope my mom doesn't see this, but just in case, I love you, Mom. I'm not speaking ill. It's just, can you please give me at least a day's notice if you're going to pop over? Thanks.
We love moms everywhere. My mom is actually coming to visit here this weekend. So I would love for her to be able to text me, Mark, and say, I'm swinging by, and me have to say, Mom, I'm working. Dinner. How about dinner? Well, Mark, what piece of advice would you give a new leader or a new coach that's traversing this journey?
I don't know if they probably don't need to hear this advice because they're already doing it, but I'm a big believer in always growing. So it's kind of like with inflation. If you're only making the set amount, it's getting really eaten into by inflation and cost of living over the years. So I kind of feel the same way when it comes to growing, that you don't want to say, well, I've read a ton of books, I've done the courses and stuff in the past, so I'm good now. I don't have to, nourish my mind anymore. I'm always big on growing. But the other thing that I've been doing, and I've been recommending that leaders do this, is when I say reading, for example, and consuming stuff, I don't always mean like just business, personal development stuff, which I'm the worst at this because I read 100 books a year between reading and audio books with Audible. But for a long time, it was 99% just business, personal development. And the last few years, I've been mixing in autobiographies a lot more, biographies, a little bit of fiction, which never did before, but it's good to consume some different stuff. So keep growing, but also learn some new things there. Just keep it interesting.
Absolutely. And if we think of other professions, your nurses, your teachers, counselors, different things, they have continuing education credits that they have to get to have their licensure and their different things valid and renewed every year. And it's because of that. Things change. You don't want to be stagnant in what you know. And while the world is growing and moving around you, there's always information and new things that we just don't know. And until we put ourselves out there to explore it and to learn it, we can't possibly grow.
Agreed.
Well, Marc, thank you so much for joining us. Is there any call to action or anything that you would like the listeners here to do today?
Well, I have a Facebook group called the Coaching Jungle, and we have a lot of great people. There's about 25,000 members, and we always want new people in there to contribute, to learn from it. So if you want to check it out, it's at thecoachingjungle.com. thecoachingjungle.com. And then my podcast, Natural Born Coaches, we've done shows on pretty much every topic imaginable for coaches, people interested in it. And that's at naturalborncoaches.com.
Perfect, Marc. All right. Well, thank you all so much. If you enjoyed today's show and found the content helpful, please leave me a 5-star rating so others can find value from it as well. Until next time, keep leading with discipline, boundaries, and truth.